Good afternoon, everyone. It is our free masterclass, and today's topic is clearer communication for English as a second language. Um, it is something that's really important. We currently don't have anyone on the phone who is an ESL speaker. Um, there are a lot of pieces of this puzzle that are applicable to English speakers as well. So I am going to cheat today, though. I have some notes because we have so much to go over, and I want to make sure that we don't forget anything here because it's all important. So the first thing I want to say is that when I work with ESL clients, my goal is not to get rid of their accent. My goal is for them to speak more clearly. And there's nothing wrong with an accent. There are some incredible world-class speakers who have worked very hard to get rid of their accents, but there are also many, who still have their accents, but they speak clearly. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's where it overlaps with English-speaking clients, because people can speak more clearly. The goal is not perfection, the goal is clarity. So by the end of this hour, you're going to understand why people misunderstand you, what actually creates clarity, and 3 ways that you can fix it. So that's our goal today. Now, one of the things that people focus on is, oh, their grammar's, it's a grammar thing. It's because they don't use $100 words. That's not true. Most people don't focus on grammar necessarily, particularly for ESL clients. However, they do focus on clarity. If somebody can't understand you, their brain has to work too hard. And if their brain works too hard, then they either zone out or they don't focus to really hear what you've said. So an example of that I'm going to give you is, yesterday, regarding the project that we talked about, there are some things that may or may not happen for us not to accomplish the deadlines. Now, tell me what I just said, not verbatim, but tell me what I just communicated to you.
That there were some deadlines that needed to be met, and we may not be able to meet them. That would be my summary.
Very good. But what if I said, we have a problem, it's the deadline? That's a whole easier subject. We've made it so much easier because we didn't add all these superfluous words. All we did was, here's what's the point, what are the details, and we go from there. And that's really what clarity is about. Even if you're an English-speaking person, what you need to do is focus on the main point, the description, and then stop talking. That's the important thing. Stop talking. Don't over-explain. Just stop talking. What's the point? What are the details? Stop. So clarity is the secret. And part of clarity is shorter conversations, not shorter conversations, I'm sorry, shorter sentences. And it's the old KISS method. Keep it simple. Silly. Keep it simple, silly. Now, I know that you've heard this story before, Vicki, but I do want to get it on the recording. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago where I went into my bank for a really simple transaction. And the cashier who walked up to me had a very heavy accent, so heavy I couldn't understand what she was saying. I mean, not a word. She might as well have been speaking Russian to me because I was clueless. Uh, I finally had to say, "May I speak to another cashier?" So she's frustrated because she's not communicating with me, and I'm stupid because I can't hear her. I'm frustrated because I just want to do a simple transaction, and this customer facing person isn't clear with me. The second cashier they brought up also had an accent, but she was very clear in what she was saying. Huge difference. Same person, same language, totally different experience. Later that day, I get on the phone and I end up with an offshore call center person. Again, heavy accent, iffy clarity, but there was still a lot of, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?" Another frustrating conversation. But then I ended up with Consumer Cellular, which is my mobile supplier. And they advertise 24/7 US based customer service. And sure enough, that's what I got. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes. I got my answer. I wasn't frustrated. It was done. So if you are customer facing, you really need to think about getting clear in your communications. And that goes for ESL as well as English speaking clients. You need to make sure that you're being crystal clear if you're customer facing, because ultimately that means you can make more money. And when you work for a living in a job, money, honey, that's the big reason that you're working. Even if you love what you do, you're still working for the money. And the more money you can make, the better you are. So, the comments that I made about the first person, I was the one who had such a heavy accent, I couldn't understand her. That is not about prejudice. That is about performance. If you can't perform your job, then you shouldn't be doing it. And you certainly shouldn't be making the biggest money. If customers can't understand you, your calls take longer, errors increase, frustration escalates, and quite frankly, trust erodes. When I'm talking to the guy at the offshore call center, I'm not feeling great confidence in what he's telling me. Not that he's not a good guy, not that he isn't smart, but if I have to keep asking, I'm thinking there's a problem. If I don't have a problem, then I'm willing to spend more money. And if I'm willing to spend more money with you, they're going to pay you more. They're going to pay you more because you're providing ultimate customer satisfaction. And that is what it's about. Now, Vicki, can you give me a story about a time when the accent was just too challenging?
Yeah, anytime I call support for tech support
Yep.
and it gets shipped over, a lot of the times I spend most of the time trying to figure out what is being said because there's usually instructions that they have to give you to correct the problem. And when you can't understand the instructions and you keep saying, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Could you repeat that again?" And the strain of hearing when you were talking about how strained it was to hear that, and I know they practice, but I'm like, "Wow, I don't know." It seems like you're saving more money by shipping the calls overseas, but I bet that that's not true. I bet that the time that they spend trying to get people to understand or why they leave your company because they can't understand what's being said, I bet it's not as big a savings as they think.
That's a really savvy point because you end up taking so much more time. And, it's not about assimilation. It's about access to opportunities, access to leadership, access to higher earning potential. You know, those are the things that speaking more clearly, either as an English speaking person or as an ESL person, when you're speaking clearly and getting your message across and doing it effectively, that's when those opportunities for leadership and more money occur. So the
Can I add one thing that
oh
I
please.
think is important? That English speaking that we often think is just American, but English speaking is, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, the UK. I mean,
Mhm.
this issue right there is so important to deal with because we like to say, "Oh, those stupid Americans," or "Those Americans," or whatever the judgment is. But English speaking is this vast network for you that is multicultural, multi-country, and I think that the more clarity you get, it makes you wealthier because of that ability to speak with clearly not just our accent, but the Australian accent or South
Hmm.
African accent or UK. It doesn't matter. That clarity is a skill set times, 5 or 6 or 7 continents.
Exactly, it is a global issue. And likewise, if I am in Spain and I am calling a Spanish company, I want to clearly hear Spanish. I don't want to have an American who's trying to speak Spanish. So it's a global issue. We're just talking about English right now, and you're absolutely right. The UK, South Africa, Australia, um, others. It really is critical, and it's a global issue. Now, if you have learned English, God bless you because we are one of the hardest languages to learn. We have a lot of idioms, a lot of slang, we have a lot of silent letters. Our vowels are sometimes long and sometimes short. It really, our consonants come together. It is a really hard language to learn. So I have the utmost respect for the people who learn it. But again, if you're in a customer facing role, you really need to be clear. Even if you have an accent, you need to be clear. And it is hard because I'm working with someone right now who's a Spanish client, and they are trying to be more clear in their English. Well, they have certain sounds. We have certain sounds that they don't have. And a TH sound, for example, their mouth is not used to going with the tongue up on the upper teeth. It's just not used to going there. So you learning is uh, learning clarity for English is not as simple as memorizing a word. They've got their words memorized, but now they've got to make their mouth do different things. I have another client, and there are several countries who do this. W's are pronounced as V's, and V's are pronounced as W's. So you have woman for woman. I was talking to somebody yesterday. They wanted to talk about a payment platform called Wise. I've never heard of wise, so that put me at a disadvantage because I thought, is she talking about being smart and experienced? But she pronounced it Vise. So my clarity on that, really bad. But again, her tongue is not used to doing certain things. Her mouth is not used to going a certain way. And there are a lot of examples of that. Another example that ESL people have that English speaking people have as well is they will drop off the end of a word. So instead of needs, it becomes need, or needed becomes need, or ring becomes rin. And that is difficult in a conversation, particularly if the ESL person is talking fast. But also, for the English speaking person, you're trying to put the rest of the pieces together. Do they need it, or is it a need, or is it something they needed? So those are the types of things that I work on when I teach my clear communications if English is your second language students. Trying to make them make their mouth move a certain way, their tongue move a certain way. And it's not common for them. So it's really difficult. Now, unfortunately, some people assume that if you have an accent, you're not very intelligent or you're not a competent person.
That's true.
You know, particularly when you're dealing with offshore customer service people. How competent are you? How much can I trust you when I have to keep asking, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please? Are you making the stuff up or is it real? Where that gets to be a problem is if you have an English speaking person who's listening to a person with an accent. If they don't think they are as intelligent as their English speaking peers or as competent as their English speaking peers, that again is a place where your income can be affected. And you don't want your income affected. So you need to make sure that your clarity is good. And that is true for English speaking people as well. If you are not a good communicator, you are probably not going to make as much as your peer who is a good communicator because of perception. It's not fair, but it's the truth. And the good news is, even though it may not be your fault that you're not a good communicator yet, communication is a skill that can be taught. And it's a skill that can be learned. So even in English, which is a hard language. So this is relevant for English speaking people as well.
It's so interesting how we level intelligence to clarity itself. You
Mhm.
know, there is the people who speak, I can't, I know how to say it. They speak a type of English where they say instead of battery, they say battery, or
Mhm.
they speak in this elegant form. And for some reason, how you speak in a particular language is akin to how people see you as intelligent or not. And I
Mhm.
was thinking, even in the United States, we have dialects that
Yes.
where there are accents, and we feel like when we hear a Southern accent that it means a certain type of thing. And then
Mhm.
New York, get out of here. God, what are you doing? That particular type of accent. And then in California, like, oh my God, like, like I always say, like in the middle of the sentence, like, I mean, we have those issues right now, but it doesn't make you sound intelligent.
Mhm.
It may make you sound kind or bro-esque or something. And I think that really brings it home. It's not necessarily an ESL person can have better degrees, more experience, and suddenly that accent or the level of clarity is going to determine that pay rate, not the value you bring. Right now, the value you bring is your clarity. And
Mm.
when you said that, that really hit me. Um, when I was growing up, my parents are from Puerto Rico, and everybody on this side of my family, they talk like this, and they have that accent. It does not matter who you talk to. But in my house, it was forbidden. And my father spent a lot of time getting rid of his accent, and he never let us talk like this. It was absolutely forbidden. And I'm just getting a clue right now from you why my father, because, I'm 100% Puerto Rican, but I sound very white.
Mhm.
I do not have that accent, and that's what he wanted. He wanted enunciation was absolutely key in the house, and he would correct you every time that you did it. You're not allowed to use slang. You're not allowed to do this. And I realize now from you talking the point he made, and he knew the value of speaking correctly.
Well, and that is very impressive on his part because he knew that clearly spoken English would make a huge difference from him for what he did for a living. And it would create, whereas the Puerto Rican accent may have created some perceptions that may have not been as positive for what he did for a living. I also really appreciate the point that you brought up about the different dialects in the US because depending on how strong your accent is, it is just like an English as a second language if you are coming from a different part of the country. And when you hear the New York accent that you just said, you're thinking, well, here's a an obnoxious person. When in truth, they may be a gentle spirit. It's just how they communicate. And the California, well, like and then I went there and I just like, well, I did my nails because I will um, that also creates a perception of something different. S-
Yeah, it's like they're rudimentary skills that we're not taught in school anymore about language, and it's all about can you speak clarity, and the point that you point details stop.
Mhm,
Those skill sets, it's not just can you speak clearly, but concisely as well. And I'm listening to this masterclass and thinking, holy smoke, this is a fundamental skill set where probably I would say at least 60% of your salary is going to be based on communication skills, and you don't know it. You think it's your degree.
mhm. No, truly, communication skills are the most important life skill that you need to have because it impacts everything. It impacts your income, it impacts your relationships, it impacts your friendships. So you really need to have it down. Now, articulation, for example, you referenced your father and in articulation. That is really very, very important, particularly if you have a dialect of some sort. Now, I'm curious, and I've never asked this question before. When I'm in Pennsylvania, I have what I consider to be a typical American accent.
Agreed.
But if somebody lives in the South and they hear me, can they understand me? Do they think I have an accent? And that is where articulation comes in, because even if they think I have an accent, or if someone has a dialect, or they have a foreign accent, or whatever, it can be very difficult. Um, and as you mentioned earlier, this is a global issue. You have various idioms and slang that are used in every country. There are certain things in the UK that are words that we have the same word in the US, but it means something totally different in the UK. And South Africa and Australia and other countries are the same way. So those are things that I can't help you fix. That's a cultural thing that you need to learn. However, articulation is something that makes all the difference, particularly if you have an accent. So if I have a Pennsylvania accent, then it is important that I be articulate in what I'm doing. And again, there are two reasons for that. From an English standpoint, that's just what we call a lazy mouth. You don't want to articulate, you don't want to move your mouth, you don't want to say the th. It's sort of a th, a t, or a s. Let me think of an example here. A throat might be a zot. And you're just being lazy as an American, or as an ESL person, you have to teach your mouth to do something that it is not accustomed to doing. Yesterday, Monday, I met with a new client, and for her particular native language, some of the most basic American letters, and we only worked on consonants, basic American consonants, it was physically painful for her to get the woo, woo sound, or the th, th. So we're trying to get her to, sort of spit her ths out. Um, it it was, when I say physically painful, I don't mean physiologically painful, but it was painful to put her mouth in these shapes and put her tongue in different places.
I
So
think that's how it is with Asian languages as well. Like if you speak Cantonese or Mandarin and learning that English, those R's, physically shaping your mouth like that is a lot of work. And I bet it would
yes.
be vice versa if you're learning Chinese as an American to make those sounds so that your Chinese is articulate.
Well, exactly. And hello, Dee Dee. Welcome. Um, Another example of that is, this particular person they have H in their language, but it's more guttural. It's a as opposed to our soft. So learning, again, learning English is very difficult for many, many other native speakers, native language speakers. And they'll learn the words, but the specific pronunciation, which creates more clarity in the conversation, is more difficult. Let me just peek here, make sure I'm not missing anything. So we've got the mouth movements, we've got the tongue placement, how open is your jaw, your lip precision when you do a w versus a v. So Americans really do some wild things with their mouths when we speak. And you don't really pay attention to it because it's natural for us. But we really do have some interesting grimaces when we speak. So from an English standpoint, if your mouth doesn't move, your words don't land. And that's where the lazy mouth comes in. And that's where articulation comes in. It really makes a difference. The other thing with English is that stress matters to us. I apologize for that beeping sound and the difference. Yes, that was me. That was me. That was the washing machine going off. Just when you think you have everything covered when you're doing something live or recording, something happens. So
You should say it was just the reminder for you to tell us about the next subject.
oh, Dee Dee, you're very savvy. Very savvy. The other thing about English that is difficult, both if you are a native English speaker or an ESL speaker, is where the stresses go in a sentence. If you say, the report is due today, there's no real stress in that. So what does that mean? And particularly if it's an urgent statement, if you want to, or an angry statement, if you're a statement of love or intimacy, if everything is on the same plane, there's no emphasis. Now I have to read this part because otherwise I will not do it properly. And that is, if I say, I need the report today, that is different from, I need the report today,
Yeah.
or I need the report today. They have three separate meanings based on where we put the stresses. And so for both English speaking as well as ESL speaking people, the lack of stress can be difficult. Yes, ma'am.
This reminded me of Tom Hanks. He has an exercise he does, and I was watching him in an interview on there's a acting school, the actors something or other, I can't remember it, but he does exactly that. He says he does this every morning. He takes this a sentence like, "I'd like a cup of coffee." And then he practices literally just what you did. He says, "I'd like a cup of coffee. I'd like a cup of coffee. I'd like a cup of coffee. I'd like a," and he does it over and over and over again just to manage where is he's putting the emphasis. And he says, when you do that, it helps him become more articulate. And he just takes the sentence, and you said something about, I need the report is due today. And so he would take the sentence, "The report is due today. The report is due today." And the report, and he tries to get faster and faster at moving it so that he practices how the articulate sound demonstrates your intention in the conversation. And when you did that, I was like, "Ooh, Tom Hanks."
I
Yeah,
did not
that
know
well,
that.
yeah,
I'm
they
sorry,
used to do
Edie, go
that in
ahead.
my debating. They used to do that in my debating class. I was I belonged to the debate team, and we would have to take one sentence and say it as many different ways possible as we could. Like the report is due today. The report's due today. The report due today is, and each one of those means something else. The report due today is supposed to be evaluated by Tom Hanks, you
Mm.
know. So it's very different. The report's due today is you better have it in, and so we had lots of fun taking one sentence and listening to each person, and you got points on how many different styles you could get going using inflection.
That's interesting. That's
Mm,
interesting. The stresses are greatly an American thing. There are many languages that do not use stresses. Everything is even.
yeah.
So
Japanese.
Japanese is that way. Russian is that way. Spanish is that way. It's just that everything's up here. It might be
Mm,
flat, but it's excited.
yeah.
Um, so it's another English nuance that ESL speakers need to learn, but also English speakers. Some people, again, it goes back to the lazy mouth. They just sort of mumble all the way through, and it doesn't matter what they're saying. Um,
That's
and
so
that kind of person, like an ESL person, they're talking from their lips. Whereas English, good English and articulation comes from the jaw. The jaw
yeah.
is moving your mouth. It's opening for th. It's opening for the.
Yeah.
And that's not, again, it's not a common thing in certain languages.
Yeah. And inflection is used in Asian language, in Chinese and other things, but they're part of the definition of a word. We're the only ones outside of Korean that use it to do meaning. And in Korean, the inflection determines strength. So we would say big, bigger, biggest. They would say ba, ba, ba. You know, biggest would be this ba
They yell
inflection.
at you.
Yeah. It's far away is not something you want to have to say.
If Didi, would you just touch on German for a minute and talk about how a German native speaker may have some challenges coming to the US?
Mhm.
And speak some
Um,
German too.
wirklich, du wolltest, dass ich ein bisschen Deutsch redete? Gottes Willen, meine Schwester, sie gibt mir immer schwierige Ausgabe zu tun. Um, German has inflection in it,
Mhm,
um, but it's more for oh my god or emotional moments. But most Germans make that inflection very subtle. Since German has hard guttural uh, tones in it,
mhm,
um, and it's standard in their language. They use the soft ones, so more of the Latin and Hispanic based. Shh. If your mother's mad at you in German, she's like, shh. That means you're really in trouble when you get home. You know, they use the soft ones. We would go ah, and we would use that's what we would do to our kids if we were in church and they were acting up or something. But in German, it's like turned. Most Germans like to talk at a very ein bisschen langweilig, so dass du weißt nicht, wie ich wirklich fühle. They like to give an even space tone so that you don't know how they feel. And they're willing to goat you by giving you the wrong impression so that they can find out what you're really about, which is very interesting. But it's very hard to make, like, Hartmut's sister's name is Gertrude, and it's so hard to say. They do not have lazy lips, and I have the American lazy lips, you know. So Gertrude, and these nasal guttural sounds, grr, uh, they're extremely hard for me.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. The important thing for English speakers as well as ESL speakers who have a different native language is really simple. It's three things. Be clear. It's okay to speak simply. We talked earlier in the conversation, Dee Dee, there are 3 points in every sentence that you make. Number 1, what is the point? Number 2, describe the point. And number 3, stop talking. You want to avoid over-explaining. You want to avoid sentences with $100 words and 30 sentences per word or per sentence.
Yeah,
30
yes.
words per sentence. Because it just makes it difficult for the listener. And as I said earlier, when it's difficult for the listener, regardless of why, their brain gets tired. They start to zone. They don't really concentrate on getting through what you're trying to say.
What's being communicated, yeah.
Exactly. So clarity, simplicity, pause. It's okay to have a pause. You can have a pause in mid-sentence.
Mhm.
You can have it at the end of a sentence. And the same when you're the listener who's about to speak. You don't have to step on their words. You can pause for a second too. So the pause has a great amount of power. So clarity, simplicity, pause, and questions. Questions are huge. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Would you say that again? So the main point is those types of sentences make a huge difference. And we talked about that before in listening, the significance of asking questions. And so when you're the speaker, even if you're predominantly the listener, when you get to speak again, questions are huge. Let's see. I just need to verify this. I'm sorry, Dee Dee, as I mentioned, I'm doing something I never, ever, ever do. I've got notes because we've got so many things I wanted to cover today. I didn't want to miss anything. So I have my cheat sheet here with my outline.
You know, I hear from someone who's teaching me how to talk that it's a good idea to take a cheat sheet sometimes to remind you.
It is. It is because you want to stay organized. The other thing that you can do, and this isn't one of the big four that I just presented, but you really want to it's okay to slow down. Now, if you're doing a video or you're doing a live, you need to speak a little more quickly. You need to keep people's attention. But when you're face to face, those pauses can count, and you can speak more slowly than you would if you're doing a live or a video. Vicki, would you agree with that? As because you are the queen of lives and videos, that when you do something like that, you want to speak a little bit faster? Yeah. Okay, good. The you need to sound you don't need to sound native. I mentioned before that there are some world-class speakers and business people who have worked very, very hard to get rid of their accent. But there are more people who still have an accent, and that's okay. They don't have to sound native. They just have to sound intentional in what they want to say. Yes, ma'am.
There's a couple of things that I would like to add and ask.
Mhm.
One is that English as a second language, when we're learning to speak in that way, you just mentioned that you don't have to get rid of your accent, which I think is really important, a distinction. You have to be clear, and your accent is okay and welcome. And I can feel right now that wherever you are in the world that is English speaking, there is sometimes a feeling of unsafety having the accent because right away people think you're an immigrant. And for some reason, in this stupid climate we're in, that can feel dangerous, etc. And I
Yes.
think I want to I want to ask and I want to make the differentiation between English as a second language where it's beneficial and people who say you should go back home because you have a thick accent.
Mhm.
And the difference between the two, I think, is super important.
Yes.
And one of the questions I have is when you're learning English as a second language, when you're clear and articulate, based on the kind of accent that you have, do you sound more kind with that kind of clarity, or is it, depending on your accent? Like, I would think that the German accent, when you speak English, maybe you don't sound kind or something. There's got to be a difference between speaking clearly and trying to speak to protect yourself. Do you
Mhm.
understand the question I'm asking?
I think so. And this goes back to stresses and rhythm as well as articulation. Because, as Dee Dee just said, with German, and German has a lot of very hard consonants, which can sound aggressive. I would think that when you're German as your native language and you're learning English, that you're going to carry some of those hard consonants through with you. So it can sound very abrupt, but as you learn clearer communication with articulation, and also stresses, which are part of it, that should soften it. But you're right. You still have, depending on which language is your native language, if they've got hard consonants in the United States, at least, that's a sound of aggression.
Well, in most Latin language, it's a sound of aggression, those harder guttural sounds.
Mhm.
That's why Germanic languages, Swiss, Dutch, so on, are very hard pressed to learn Latin languages like French, Spanish, Italian, and so on. and versa versa, because they're not used to them. It's extremely hard. It took me a long time. I felt like someone was yelling at me all the time. But then I look at people like Kissinger and
Mhm.
his inflection into English. Listening to Kissinger, and his accent was still there. You could understand him. He was very clear. He had a great vocabulary. I mean, he was amazing as a foreign English speaker who still had that identity as non-native speaker.
Exactly. And that's a great example. Kissinger had a very strong accent, but he had an incredible amount of clarity.
Yeah, he
And
did.
clarity in communication, from a business standpoint, not only does it save the business money, I think I think the number is $84 million a year that businesses lose because of poor communication. That's a
Wow.
whole lot of money. And if you are a good communicator, and that can include ESL people who are clear in their language, make 10 to 15% more money. So there is value in addition to your relationships. There is value in being clear in what you're communicating. As I mentioned earlier, the great thing about language issues is, number one, it's not your fault. Either, I mean, you were born in a different country, your native language is something different. That isn't something that's your fault by any means. It could be that you're an English speaking person, but the home that you were raised in simply wasn't articulate. That's not your fault. It's what you learned. However, good communication is teachable and it's learnable. So there is no excuse for not moving to that next level, because it might be difficult, but it's still learnable.
I keep thinking about Starstruck and, you know, uh, the movie Starstruck, and the scene in the kitchen of the family over dinner, and the style in which they communicate to each other with, loud and screaming and emotional, and
You mean
all the
Moonstruck
English. Is it Moonstruck? Maybe it's
with
Moonstruck. Yeah.
Cher in it? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking?
Yes.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
with you now.
Yeah. And, the English, the style of English that was spoken was never a complete, proper sentence, which was always so funny to begin with. And, it's kind of hard because we're caught between cultural um, acceptance and dominant or predominant accepted communications, and I'm wondering how to weight it. Which one should be weighted and when?
That's a hard question. Yes, Vicki?
I want to add to the question. What I think is, for me, the reason I wanted to learn to speak English really well is because, when I look at actors or musicians that are accepting the big awards, the Oscars, the Grammys, the things like that. When you take a look at somebody like Christopher Plummer, or you take a look at somebody like the original James Bond, whose name is escaping me right now, and I can't believe why, I don't know why, but when they spoke, the power they commanded by being articulate, by being aware of their sentence and how it's spoken, that kind of command, if you take a look at, um, Tom Hanks right now, he's the number one actor in the world. Um, One of the key things that he shares is that you can listen to him when he was in the role of Big, or you can listen to him when he was in the astronaut Apollo 13 role or the Forrest Gump role. One of the things that he emulates is the articulate accent of each different role. And one of them creates compassion in the tone, or the other creates humor in the tone, or the other creates leadership in the tone. And I think that you become how you speak, full stop. You think how you speak, full stop. And if you want to change your mindset, then vocabulary is one of the best ways to change your mind, and on a fundamental scaled level. And whether you're American or you're ESL or English speaking or foreign speaking, doesn't matter. Even if you speak your language in that way, I feel as though there's a type of dignity that a person has when they can speak and when they become a good communicator. They have mastered so many skill sets that have to happen. You have to watch how you enunciate things. And that's what you're talking about today. It's the languaging where you are noticing how Americans have to move their jaw in order to make it, where other people, when you speak Spanish, they always tease the Puerto Ricans for not being able to speak. They always say that it sounds like they're talking and water is coming out of their mouth versus the way Spanish is spoken in Mexico. And then it's like, "La, la, 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 la." And so that that particular skill set that you're talking about is more than just money. It's a type of dignity. It's a type of um, it's a type of leadership skill. It proves that you have a level of excellence that you live by. And I think that is primarily one of the most important things that most people don't even understand. And today, I think in this masterclass, you have brought that forward in such a way. It's not just, I get that we have to understand how to go and woo, woo, and practice it. I understand why. And I also understand the gift of that when it's completed, when you're done, the gift of who you become. You become powerful, you become a leader, you become somebody with dignity, somebody with confidence. It's all of the skill sets that you have there. This is like a personal development course, you know?
Well, it absolutely is because again, communication is the number one life skill. And I think that your point about dignity with articulation, it brings leadership, and that's a great way to end today's call because when you have clarity in your communication, whether you are English speaking or English as a second language speaking, makes all the difference in the perception that people have of you from the dignity standpoint, from the leadership standpoint, from the basic communication standpoint and being clear on what a project is. It all makes a difference. And in the process, you're earning that dignity that you're talking about. You can earn more income in that, and you're creating a better perception of yourself because perception is reality to people. It's not fair, but it's true. So articulate, pause, and remember to keep the sentences short. What is the point? Brief description. Stop talking. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to wrap it up and stop talking. Ladies, thank you for being on here today. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and I will see all of you